Now, for more on this, I want to bring in Alexander Nekrassov, a former Kremlin advisor. He joins us now from our London studio. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, a lot of people are pointing the finger of blame at President Putin and the Kremlin. You were a former Kremlin advisor. What is your response to these accusations?
Well, I think it's a dangerous game, to be honest with you, to start accusing somebody before the investigation has even started, technically speaking. And I also find it very bizarre that foreign ambassadors have visited the place where Boris Nemtsov has been shot and killed and laid flowers there, because, you know, ambassadors, diplomats, they don't really do things like, they shouldn't be doing things like that, especially as it's a criminal investigation, and they are basically politicizing it. And also, what I find strange is that one by one Western leaders were saying that they condemned this murder and that they were expecting an investigation. Some said an independent investigation. This is also raising tensions. This is, you know, inflaming tensions. This is politicizing a criminal investigation. I really don't understand how this works.
Nemtsov had spoken about death threats on a number of occasions, and last year he spoke to CNN's Anthony Bourdain. I want to just play a clip of that interview now, if you can take a listen.
We were supposed to be dining at another restaurant this evening, and when they heard that you would be joining me, we were uninvited. Should I be concerned about having dinner with you?
This is a country of corruption. And if you have business, you are in a very unsafe situation. Everybody can press you and destroy your business. That's it. This is a system.
Now, he knew he was a target. Restaurateurs seemed to know he was also a target. What do you make of those fears? And if not, if the Kremlin is not involved, who do you think would want him dead?
Well, first of all, I must tell you that opposition leaders in Russia tend to occasionally say that they fear for their security. This is not something new. Also, I have to say that opposition politicians in Russia say things that no politicians say in America or Western countries would ever dare to say. For example, Mr. Nemtsov would call on overthrow of Putin and the government, and others as well. So I don't really think we should look too much into that. And I suspect personally that somebody somewhere heard him say those things and used it to his advantage to provoke the situation, to cause tension politically wise. And in this respect, I think that it's very early to say who might have done it, but I have heard from my sources in Moscow that the investigators have several strands that they're looking at. One is concerning extremists in Ukraine, because there have been two developments in Moscow which lead them to believe that they might have been involved, these extremists from Kiev and eastern Ukraine. Secondly, they're thinking that it might have been Islamic extremists, because Nemtsov was very vocal on Charlie Hebdo and the killings in Paris, and he was criticizing the radicals, Islamists and so on. And another one is basically a criminal case looking into possible business links that he had, because he was very vocal in criticizing some businessmen, not just in Russia generally, but specifically in the region of Yaroslavl, where he was a deputy in the local parliament. And that is another option. And there's also a personal sort of strand where they think that there might have been, you know, a jealous husband or boyfriend and so on. But it's too early to say who is behind it. But I can tell you one thing, that for the Kremlin to go after Nemtsov, it's just bizarre. It's just, you know, mad. Because here's a question for you. Why would a president with an 80% approval rating go after an opposition politician who barely registers on the public radar? He's not the leading opposition politician as he's presented in Western media.
And
his
that is a fair
star
point.
is fading.
that is a fair point, but critics of Putin in the past have suffered. Russian journalist and fierce Kremlin critic Anna Politkovskaya was shot in her apartment in 2006. And we know Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko was poisoned with a lethal dose of radioactive polonium. We still don't know who ordered those killings, and now we have this one. What do you think those deaths have in common?
Well, I don't think they have anything in common, because I know, for example, the Litvinenko case very well. I saw documents that very few people saw, like the report by Scotland Yard, the report by the Russian Prosecutor General's office. There's absolutely no proof of any involvement of the Russian state. And the Russian side has told the British side that there is nothing in their report, in their documents, to prove anything. My information about Litvinenko, for example, is that he was poisoned not because the Russian state sent somebody, but because he was involved in a ring of smugglers who used these materials to sell them, and he got poisoned by accident. As regards Politkovskaya, yes, it was a high-profile killing, but it damaged Putin, because it happened on his birthday. Now, who on earth would do that, apart from people who would want to damage Putin, who would want to show some connection? And another thing I need to tell you. Now, as a Russian, I know perfectly well how these things work in Moscow and in Russia generally. Now, to kill somebody beside the Kremlin walls, where you could see the St. Basil Cathedral, this is a classical provocation. You know, nobody would have done that without, keeping in mind one thing: Putin will be sort of blamed for that. And of course, when we have world politicians, world leaders, and I stress again, diplomats are there in Moscow to actually help resolve problems in relations between Russia and their respective countries. They can't come to places like where Nemtsov was murdered and basically hamper the criminal investigation by politicizing it.
Okay.
And how is it of any business of world leaders, Western world leaders, to interfere into a criminal investigation until it finishes?
We really appreciate your time today. Alexander Nekrassov, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure we will speak to you again very soon. Thank you.